So, hi everyone, my name is Farnia Furnell, and together we're here to deliver a refreshing and insightful just in time workday session meant to set you up for greater productivity. Our series is called Leadership COGS, and today we're talking about changing your mind and harnessing your power to change perception about your performance. My whole discussion here is very personal. For those who don't know me, after years as a Fortune 100 senior global leader in financial services and in consulting, I realized that there was a gap in my understanding. I'm a first-gen systems engineer trained in business, and I knew process and I knew technology inside and out. But my difference in culture caused me to really struggle and struggle with unwritten rules that usually help the best leaders in the best teams to thrive. So I used what I knew and I learned what I didn't, and I launched the Lenserf Group. And nearly 12 years later, I'm really excited to be able to say that we've helped thousands of leaders and countless teams in more than 44 countries to soar past limitations and exceed their potential. And in that time, I realized that there are four pillars that high performing teams and high performing people all share, and I call them COGS. So, what are these COGS? Here, well, the COGS framework is as follows. C is for celebrating consistency, which is a key attribute of high performance. O is for taking ownership of not only your being, but also your actions. G is for growing out of the glue. And I specifically say growing out of the glue because it's often that glue that keeps you and others stuck. You feel stuck and you're not making progress. And then lastly, S. S is for the stamina to stretch into your next in spite of the discomfort. And high performing teams, high performing people feel the stretch and keep on stretching. So our focus today is on the O. And again, that O is ownership. It's the being and the actions that go together for ownership. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and I invite you all to speak into this space. What inspired you to join today? All right, I see there, new year, new you. You wanted to explore some leadership training and help yourself elevate your game in 2025. So today, guys, we're talking to Getrude Matshe, and through an African coaching group that I belong to, I had the privilege and the fortune to speak at length with her. She's a mother, she's a grandmother, an entrepreneur, an author, a 3 times TEDx speaker, a Rooney International scholar, an investor, actress, and her story podcast host. Over many decades, she has worn many hats and has created opportunity for thousands of others on multiple continents. And she joins us today, like virtually, clearly, but from Melbourne, Australia. We're going to talk about challenges. So I know many years ago, you made a really courageous decision to emigrate from Zimbabwe to New Zealand alone, with young children in tow and in search of safety and opportunity. Can you tell us what happened to change your mind about your life circumstances?
Oh, leaving home was not an easy decision. I grew up during the AIDS pandemic in Zimbabwe in the late 90s, early 2000s. We still didn't have any of the ARV drugs for AIDS. And I guess the straw that broke my back was my ex-husband coming home from work in tears because he had to do a hysterectomy on a 9-month-old baby girl who had been gang raped by 3 men. I remember thinking, I want to be safe. I want my children to be safe. And so you search for safety, you search for a good place for you to bring up your kids. And I found myself living in New Zealand, far away from family, from friends, but with the desire to live long enough to be a grandmother.
Mhm. That's a really powerful story, and 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 I can only imagine what you might have felt during that period of time to make such a radical change, right? And decide to make such a big shift in your life and in the life of your children. I and through these uncomfortable situations, like I think about many years ago, I decided to leave my work. This is not even on the same scale, but I started working at the age of 14, and to think that years later, I decided to stop working, and I felt like making that decision to do something what felt like radical. It was I felt fear. Clearly, it's a different kind of fear than you shared, but to make that jump and to make a big shift, but I felt like there was an opportunity there. So let's talk about opportunity. I'd love for you to share because when you were in New Zealand, you created a recruiting business and it performed really, really, really well. In fact, as an actress, you played roles in popular films like Cry Freedom with Denzel Washington and King Kong and Avatar. Can you tell us about how an audition turned out to be a big, big opportunity for you beyond just the audition?
Well, when I auditioned for King Kong with Peter Jackson, I was in film school at the time,
Hmm.
and I heard that they were looking for African extras. So I went for the audition. I was cast in two parts in the movie as an extra. Thought I was really special, but I really wasn't. They had to double up on roles because they couldn't find enough African extras to take part in the film.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I was volunteering for the refugee service, helping other African immigrants find work, recreate themselves, use their transferable skills for
Hmm.
employment. And I had a big network in the African community. So I approached the casting director and said I could easily come up with 350 people, which is what they needed for one scene in the film. Saw a business opportunity. One
Hmm.
of my tutors at college challenged me to create a 1 minute commercial and to pitch as if I had a casting agency. And I ended up getting the contract to supply all the ethnic extras for King Kong and for Avatar as well. So that was a very, very fascinating part of my life.
Yeah, talk about opportunity, converting an audition into like this massive, massive debut with hundreds of people and providing opportunity for others. So I'm curious, for those of you that have joined us, how many listening right now might feel a little tired playing the same roles that you always play over and over again? And I just wonder, hearing this story, how might you change your mind to amplify your impact on your job, in your role, in whatever place you're in right now? Feel free to share that in the chat or just think about it for yourself. Um, so, Gertrude, I'd like to ask you another question. So I love how you converted this again film opportunity. You already had a successful recruiting company. You leveraged this and others got their chance to shine on the big screen. I really love that. And I know as an entrepreneur, you have a unique ability to see opportunity. I know you told me about the New Zealand government and when they asked you to help in supporting conferences to boost tourism. Then the pandemic hit and you were hit with lots of personal losses. And I just wonder if you can share with us what you've done to boost others and other female business owners who might also have had needs.
I think the power of storytelling is profound. You know, when we share our stories, you not only shine a light at the end of the tunnel for somebody else who might be going through a similar challenge.
Mhm.
What I've managed to successfully do out of the pandemic crisis, I mean, so many people were hit in different ways, business-wise, personally, but we all had to find ways of pivoting and ways of getting back on our feet when things went wrong. And it's through the power of storytelling. I think that's really how her story started. I wanted to create a platform where we could uplift, inspire, energize, empower other people with what we were going through. And it's been one of the most exciting projects I've ever been involved in, especially when you start to see the ripple effect of what storytelling can actually do. The pandemic affected so many people. I know that for me personally, I had a massive opportunity to bring in people for conferences in New Zealand through the Department of Tourism, and then travel stopped. And in the blink of an eye, what was a successful business crumbled. And I had to think of ways to reinvent myself. And really, the use of the internet was how I managed to pivot. I put my platform online, and we were pushing out positive, inspiring stories during the pandemic to people who were looking for hope, who were looking for inspiration. And my community just grew exponentially that way.
Mm, okay. So essentially, you changed your mind about what was actually available to you in that moment. So the pandemic was trying to shut you down, and you kind of pivoted to shift from shut down to lit up. So I invite those who are on the line just listening to contemplate, what are your actual choices when you're faced with challenge? What can you do? In the world of coaching, we like to think about accepting circumstances for now and potentially converting them into something different. We all have those same choices. So I just invite you to pause and think about that for a moment. But I'll ask you this. So Gertrude, in the many years since the pandemic, you have learned from the best. I mean, over the course of your career, this is decades long. You've learned from the best. You've lived in Poland. You've lived several places in the US. You've taught as a visiting scholar, from your book. I think, is it Born on the Continent, Ubuntu? I
I
just
just
wonder,
wonder.
wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about how you learned and who you might have learned from over the course of your career that amplified your impact?
I have to give credit to the giants whose shoulders I stand on.
Mm.
I will start definitely with my grandmother. My mother's mother was my second mom.
Mm.
She cared for me from the age of 9 months until I was 3. I was very, very close to her. And she was a woman who was resourceful, resilient, who lived in very, very difficult circumstances, was left with 2 little kids. I was 9 months old. My sister is 2 years older than me when my parents got a scholarship to go to the UK to study. From there, of course, my parents are my next inspiration. My father was the visionary. My dad was the kind of man who could see things coming from a mile off. He would tell me that anything that was in my mind could be turned into reality. I remember when I was about 6 years old, I used to clean out my father's wardrobe, and that's how I got my pocket money. So I had to fold his clothes and roll up his socks and make everything neat, and he would leave pocket money in his jacket pockets. And one day I threw away an old pair of shoes that I had found at the bottom of the wardrobe. And he walked in and he said, "What are you doing with my shoes? Those shoes are magic," he said. And I said, "They're old, I'm throwing them away." They had no soles. And he put me on his lap and he picked up this pair of shoes and pulled out a newspaper at the bottom of the shoes. And this newspaper was dated to 1967, the year that I was born. Then he pulled out a photograph of himself standing on the steps of the Colosseum in Rome. And he said, "Do you see the shoes in this photo?" I said, "Yes." He said, these are the same shoes. I had to put newspapers at the bottom of my shoes because I couldn't afford to buy a new pair of shoes to get on that first flight to go to Europe. And there was my dad in 1967 standing on the steps of the Colosseum with shoes that had no soles, with his dream to go to university and to look after his family. So my dad was a big thinker. He didn't see any barriers to anything he wanted. But my mother was the entrepreneur. My mom could sell snow to the Eskimos. She was just the most amazing salesperson. She taught me how to knit, how to sew, how to crochet from the age of 6. And she taught me how to sell. So I grew up in Rhodesia before Zimbabwe had independence. And we had to cross the racial line and go on the other side of the tracks to all the white neighborhoods because that's where the money was. So she was a nurse. And when my parents came back from the UK, my dad couldn't get a white-collar job because he was black. Nobody would employ him. So he had to work in a chicken slaughtering factory, killing chickens, despite all of his degrees that he got from the UK. So they had to work hard and look after 5 kids. So my mom doubled up with her nursing career. She created a business where she made things and we would go and sell. So I was taught to hustle, to make money at a very early age, and it changed the trajectory of my life.
Impressive. Very impressive. I know at one point you shared with me that one of your mentors, beyond your parents and your incredible lineage, came from a place that you didn't expect. And their choices were very different than yours, yet you forged incredible relationships. So I just wanted to acknowledge, like, thank you for sharing the story with your parents and your ability to find mentorship in perhaps not so traditional places has been amazing. Thank you, Gertrude. You know, I know we're nearing the end of our time, so I'm just going to share some of what we talked through today. Our session today was about changing your mind, and you all came here for a different reason. But know that I'd love for you to walk away with just a few key ideas. One, change your mind about your ability to overcome uncomfortable situations. Like I was so excited last night when the Eagles won the Super Bowl because 2 years ago when they got to the Super Bowl against the same team, it was uncomfortable when they lost. A lot was riding on their shoulders. They change your mind about your ability, your own resourcefulness in overcoming uncomfortable situations. As Gertrude shared with us. Number two, change your mind about the height that you might be able to reach to magnify your impact. So are you playing small? Just ask yourself that question and evaluate it very personally. Are you playing small? Are you going for it and dreaming big? Number three, change your mind about the decisions that you actually have the power to make. Oftentimes in uncomfortable circumstances or when things are very challenging around us, we opt to play small. We opt to go inside instead of going out and evaluating what might be present around us, what might be able to be in our access. In any situation, you can accept it. And when you do, sometimes that looks like silence, or you can convert it and change it into something that can serve you and likely many others. So, in your workplace right now, what's your version of discomfort? What might you be accepting? And where do you have an opportunity to convert that into something else? And then, lastly, change your mind about who might be available to help you on your path. So, Gertrude shared a story with us about her family and how her father had soulless shoes. And when you think about that, you don't necessarily think about that as the inspiration to move to another countries, the inspiration to flee where you feel fear. the inspiration to do big things and put yourself out there and create opportunity for many, many others. You may not see those soulless shoes as that opportunity, but in your world, who can help you on your path? What might you be overlooking in terms of mentorship? Perhaps they don't look like you. Perhaps they don't sound like you. They may not be like you, but there may be a lesson available to you. So I encourage you to think big and to think beyond what tradition might hold. So I really appreciate you for joining us today. I'll be back with Leadership COGS on the 24th of February, but in the meantime, know that you can catch this session and others on demand in the
But
app. But if you have any questions or need help accessing your own resources, feel free to connect with me or to Gertrude. Her link. So feel free to drop your email to me, to Gertrude. Feel free to reach out. And as always, take care and be well.